Sherry, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you, the founder of BuzzAlong Coffee and the YouTube channel BuzzAlong. Coffee and cycling, what a classic pairing. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me here. I'm great. Yeah, indeed, the coffee and cycling goes hand in hand.
So how did you get the idea or the kind of the motivation to start a coffee company?
Well, I'm from the coffee region in Colombia, Armenia, Quindío, so it's kind of part of my heritage. And as coffee and cycling goes together hand in hand, every time I go for a bike ride, I always dream about my coffee break. So I decided, why not bring the coffee from my region here to Europe.
I like it. I feel like that syncs up perfectly. And then I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about your cycling background. From watching your YouTube videos, it's even when you started posting, it seemed like you were a pretty accomplished cyclist already. Very comfortable with long distance, 200 kilometer, 120 mile bike rides. But how did you get started cycling and what's the motivation to do these longer events?
Well, I started cycling over 2 years and a half ago. Actually, it was the first time after a while that I took a bike in London for commuting, and then I enjoyed it so much. The freedom of going from one place to another, getting lost and discovering new places is amazing. So I find motivation in bikepacking for these long distances. My first trip was from Amsterdam to Paris to see the Tour of France, and I really enjoyed it. It felt like an accomplishment when I got there. So since then, I started doing more and more rides and longer, and you just build up the distance on this basis.
It's interesting to hear kind of that motivation. And I've seen a lot of your videos seem to be traveling, cycling relatively long distances to see professional cyclists. But you seem to personally prefer maybe more of the experience style trips, more of the adventure style trips. Would you classify yourself as a racer or as somebody who just kind of enjoys these bigger adventures?
For me, I enjoy these bigger adventures, and racing is also like an adventure with a competitive element. So, for example, at my longest race, Transiberica, it felt like a mix of a race sometimes and sometimes like a bikepacking trip because you just in new environments, exploring new places, traveling around the country. So it's like a mix. Ultra cycling is for me like a mix of racing and bikepacking. So sometimes you want to go faster and be a bit more competitive, and sometimes you just want to enjoy the landscape.
Okay, so let's jump into the Transiberica because that was a great video and a great story. What is it, and what made it motivated you to do something that was that long?
Well, to be honest, I didn't plan that much. So I just signed up for the event and I said, okay, let's have an adventure. It was my first self-routed event. And yeah, it was definitely an adventure. I ended up climbing over the Pyrenees on a hiker bike trail, an experience I will never forget, but it was amazing. I will totally do it again. And yeah, it's just, put it yourself. Signing up and just taking on the challenge.
And so, okay, so this event is a unsupported or self-supported, I would say, bikepacking race in the neighborhood of, and correct me if I'm wrong here in the kilometers, in the ballpark of 3,600 kilometers. But I think that varies, right, depending upon which route you choose, because you just have to get through. I think it's typically 10 checkpoints in basically any route, as long as you get to those checkpoints.
Yes, that's correct. So there's different checkpoints and you have to create your own route. Sometimes there's mandatory parkour, so you have to do part of this route, but mostly it's self-routed. But yeah, I didn't plan my route that much, so that's something I will advise to somebody who is planning to do a unsupported self-routed event, really plan your route because it will make a huge difference. But that's the good thing with ultra cycling. The more events you do, the more experience you get, and it gets easier with every event.
Well, I like your attitude and just how comfortable you are with going it. With kind of doing this. I guess I would imagine that if I was doing something that long, I would do a lot of prep beforehand just to make sure I had every angle, every route kind of mapped out. I did notice watching your video and then watching kind of all the competitors compete that you were choosing. It seemed like often choosing a different route, maybe a bit more gravel heavy than most of the competitors. What was your thought process behind that?
Well, to be honest, it was like just because of the route planning. I didn't realize that there was so much gravel. Luckily, I had a gravel bike with road tires, still chunky tires. So I managed to ride this kind of terrain, but it was a real surprise. Yeah, but you explore really nice places. We managed to go to really cool places in France and in the Pyrenees. So yeah, it added to the experience and the challenge.
Did you have a favorite part or maybe a more memorable part of that race?
Yes, it was the Consuegra windmills, the windmills of Don Quixote. I felt like I was Don Quixote with Sancho Panza, just the battle against the giants, and it was super fun because I live in the Netherlands and here is very windy, so you get used to using your aero bars and time trialing. So I was able to use my skill there of time trialing to really push it on that segment.
Ah, I see. Kind of real comfortable in the headwinds or the crosswinds, as it were.
Indeed.
I'm Southern California based, LA, and right on the coast, and I find that it's actually a very similar riding to the Netherlands, where the crosswinds kind of come off the ocean, and so we are definitely used to the wind as well.
Yeah.
Now, to start out that video, and I like that you kind of flagged the windmills as very memorable. You chose a quote from Don Quixote. When life itself seems lunatic, who knows where the madness lies? Great quote. It's a little bit ominous. Why did you choose that to start off your Transiberica video?
Well, a lot of people ask me if I'm crazy when I'm doing this kind of events, but that quote reflects is like, what's the definition of crazy? Taking on these challenges or cycling, taking an adventure. I think life is like this. You have to try new things, and even if it seems crazy, sometimes it could be the greatest thing that ever happens to you.
I like it. And so now thinking through a race like this, I think a lot of people won't realize that it is a so-called one-stage race, right? So once the gun goes, the time never stops. How did you think about when was the appropriate time to stop at night and get rest, or kind of find a hotel, or how did you plan around when you would sleep and when you would get rest?
Well, time management in this kind of events is key. So you have to minimize your stop, be really efficient when you resupply in supermarkets. I still rush every time I go on a bikepacking trip into the supermarket, like I'm in an ultra race. So it's really important to practice these kind of things. And normally, I around 10 p.m., 11, I was looking for a hotel nearby, and my plan was to get around 4 hours of sleep, and if necessary, push it a little bit at the end.
So that is not a lot of sleep, and it kind of the sleep deprivation, I'm sure, stacks up over the days. I think your finish time was around 10 hours, 10 days, sorry, 16 hours. In that ballpark, did you find that on the back half of the race, the sleep deprivation was really getting to you, or could you push through that?
I think in this one, my objective was to manage it properly, so I got sleep every night. It was easier than my previous races. in this case. So because it was such a long race, 10 days, I decided to get more sleep. And then, if necessary, again, push it or not sleep, skip some nights, but that wasn't necessary.
I like it. And how much are you watching where the other competitors are and kind of gauging how hard you push based on that? Or how competitive is an adventure like this?
Well, my first two races, I didn't watch where my competitors were, so I was always really stressed thinking I was the last one on the race. And in Transiberica, I learned from that, so I was not watching the competition. And then it's much better, so like you can pace yourself better, you can manage your breaks based on that. So that's really helpful.
Okay, fair enough. And then did you have a goal to try to win this, or just try to place high up, or how do you think about being competitive in this environment?
I like to have something to motivate myself, so I always try to go for the win, but of course enjoy the adventure at the same time. For me, winning is not everything. For me, it's the overall adventure. But I feel like sometimes you have to have a goal, an objective, to be able to push through the tiredness when you are not motivated, when you feel you're gonna quit. So I think having a goal is really important.
Um, no, I really like it. It's like a very holistic perspective from watching your video. I like that a lot of the shots really highlight um like the beautiful landscape that you got to go through, and I guess to me how surprisingly rural the environment was around, which makes for, it seems like, amazing riding. But on the flip side, did you have how easy access to sort of food, bike repair, bike shops, as well as like hotels was everything? Did you feel like you were really out on your own, or did you feel like resources were available when you needed them?
I feel in Spain is great because there's a lot of restaurant bars open until late there, even in the small villages. So resupplies was not issue. Only in the Pyrenees, I ran out of water there. Luckily, I had a filtration water bottle. That was a lifesaver. So the infrastructure in Spain is really good. So I totally recommend it. There's no issue with finding a place to sleep and great food.
It's interesting to hear that perspective. It seems like, as far as ultra cycling events go, while this one might be extremely physically demanding in terms of resource management, it seems like there's options available, is the way I think. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the weather that you experienced on the course. And frankly, in all of your videos, it seems like you're never cycling in like picturesque weather. It's always too hot, too cold, rainy, overly humid. Yeah, what was the weather like on the course over those 10 days?
Well, Transiberica, there's a lot of changes in the weather conditions. Sometimes you can go from boiling hot, like 40 degrees, to freezing up in the mountains, like -2 degrees. So it's really like it can change very quickly in a day, even.
Absolutely. Now, do you find that you're somebody who like reacts well to different kinds of weather conditions, or do you prefer a specific weather environment?
Well, I don't like cold weather. I prefer mild weather, to be honest. But yeah, I'm easy. I can adapt to different conditions. It's just staying positive and thinking to yourself, okay, it cannot be cold forever, or it cannot be that warm forever. So just try to keep a positive mindset every time there is a new challenge.
I definitely like could really empathize with you. I felt really bad, and I don't know. There was a section of the ride where it looked like you had just been rained on for hours, and it was and you found shelter almost in like a I would call it like a barn, but there was like a soccer football arena in there. It seemed like you were both cold and wet, which is a rough combination.
Yes, indeed, that could be a tough combination. It was actually a storm. Some of the riders got into the storm. They kept on cycling, and yeah, there was even hail there.
So, so that is part of the strategy, right? Of if you know that weather's coming in, to maybe hunker down and just find shelter for a few hours and let that pass.
Yes, depends what's your approach. Some people prefer to not sleep and keep on riding through these kind of conditions. And some others have the strategy of stopping, maybe getting some sleep, and then push it harder on the next part of the route.
Was there any point, like, I just as you kind of describe this, it seems like it's just such a tough event. Was there any point where you felt like abandoning?
No, I never think about abandoning an event. I always think to myself, if I can keep on cycling, I will finish it no matter what. So that keeps you going through moments that you feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna fall off the bike because I haven't slept for days. I think it's just having this in your mind, like, okay, I can still go on a bike. I will keep on riding.
Wow, you are very determined. I feel like I would. That's just like so long and hard. It would cross my mind many many times to just kind of walk off the course. I guess I don't know where you would always go, so maybe you're kind of committed. Um, so now let's talk a little bit about the finish. Um, do you feel an overwhelming sense of accomplishment when you finish, or are you just too exhausted to enjoy it? What's that like?
To be honest, I feel nostalgic. Every
Uh,
time you are on a race, you are suffering sometimes during the race, but at the end of the race, you are sad that it's finishing. It's like, oh my God, now I have to go back to normal life.
and well, it's interesting that you say that, because you're very much now trying to make ultra cycling a bigger part of your life, correct? Do you have upcoming events that you're looking forward to, or ambitious goals kind of down the line?
Yes, for me, ultra cycling is not a sport, it's part of my life. So now I'm dedicating more time to it. I'm planning to do the transcontinental race this year and also race around Denmark and some of road events like Bohemian Border Bash.
Wow. Okay. Lots upcoming, and I know you're have kind of maybe switched priorities so that you can dedicate more time to that. So that's really exciting. Now, when going back to the finish, I'm always shocked and almost smile. A lot of these finishes, it seems like you might cross the line and there's no one there, or only a few people who are cheering you. Um, do you feel like ultra, like, are you motivated by a lot of people at the finish line, or I guess presumably not, given that often you're kind of you cross this huge event, you finish this huge event, but then cross the finish line and almost feel like maybe nobody knows about it.
Yes, indeed, it's very different from other traditional events because sometimes you finish the event at 2 in the morning, so nobody is there. But still, it feels so nice when okay, I finally arrived to the destination and this sense of accomplishment.
It's
And you
sort
honestly too tired.
of course, of course. It sort of very much like underlines the personal motivation, I guess, that you must have and that all the riders must have to complete an event like this.
Indeed, yes, it's about finishing and okay, you tell to yourself, I managed to do it.
I love it. I love it. So let's jump to your most recent videos, the Colombia trip. What was the motivation to do a bikepacking adventure in Colombia?
Well, I feel Colombia is such a beautiful country, but a lot of people don't know about it. So I wanted to show from a local perspective how beautiful it is and that people will be encouraged to visit it. It's such a fantastic region where I come from, the coffee region, and it has so much to offer. I was definitely blown away by the amazing landscapes there.
And the route of your trip, were you kind of roughly riding from farm to farm, kind of sampling the local flavor as well as trying to hit up specific cycling routes?
Yes, indeed. So the plan was to go from one coffee farm to another coffee farm and also being able to explore the landscape around it. It really adds to the experience to see where the coffee comes from, and also wanted to hit some of the local climbs like La Linea. So, like kind of the bucket list Strava segment. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to take the segment. There was a pro cyclist who got it, but I still enjoy it.
Okay, and maybe you could help me clarify this one, because La Linea is one of the top climbs in Colombia and one of the most revered climbs globally. But I thought it was a road climb, but I think you showed a bit more of the gravel or off road nature when you showed the footage.
Yes, indeed, there's two climbs. There is La Linea, the traditional one, but now there is a lot of trucks crossing that road. So now it's very popular, the La Linea off-road. So I decided to do this one, and it's super beautiful. It's around 25K up the hill, and it's quite steep. So you feel really good when you get to the top.
I feel like that's an adventure in itself.
Indeed, yeah.
Okay, and so you were trying to take the Strava time.
Well, I thought maybe I give it a try, but then I saw the the time of for the segment, and I was like, no, let's just enjoy it.
Right, right. I feel like perhaps a few years ago it would be a bit more obscure, but I feel like now I think pro cyclists and Colombia has quite a few Tour de France level cyclists as well. So I imagine the competition is pretty ferocious there.
Indeed, the Colombian escarabajos, they go pretty fast up the hills.
So this is something that we were talking about a little bit beforehand, but I wanted to bring up the topic of cycling infrastructure, and it's kind of interesting getting your take on it now, having right cycled through both Colombia and I know you live in the Netherlands. And so this was something that was perhaps is on par with my experience here in the U.S. Where I am in Southern California, a lot of attention is paid to adding bike lanes, adding what I would call like extensive cycling furniture, which is great to highlight, to make sure to encourage cycling and to make it safe. But in Latin and in Central and Southern America, it seems like that infrastructure, that push has not caught up yet. But from traveling through Costa Rica and watching your video in Colombia, it seemed like very similar, that the biking culture is so strong there that I would almost call that a cycling paradise. I guess, yeah, what are your thoughts on cycling infrastructure and how to approach that?
I was positively surprised when I arrived to Colombia, especially in Bogota. Now there's a lot of cycling infrastructure
Okay.
on the weekend. The road was full of cyclists, like families, people with friends. It was like, wow, very impressive. And also in my hometown in Armenia, they started to add cycle lanes and bring in more awareness about the cyclists on the road. But I focus my trip mostly off road because the landscapes are amazing when you take the rural paths, and it allows you to get deeper into the mountains to more remote areas where the only thing you can hear is birds.
Right, and maybe that's one of the benefits of it is that those roads, I imagine, are wide enough for cars to fit through, but the car traffic must be so low that it makes for a very pleasant ride, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. There is a lot of countryside roads, and they are only used by motorbikes or jeeps. So there's no traffic really, and you have it all for yourself, and it's really nice to ride on. It's not very technical, so it's good if you're starting into gravel or mountain biking. But I really enjoyed because it was my first time on a mountain bike.
Now, now on this trip, were you visiting the farms as potential suppliers, or do you already have that worked out with your own coffee business?
So I wanted to visit the farms first to know how everything works there, to see uh, how the coffee plantations are, the processes, and to ensure that it fits with the culture that I want to have, the concept of my coffee brand. So it was super fun to cycle to the farm, see all the surroundings, and then when you taste the coffee, it's like, oh, it smells like the place I just cycled through. So it added so much to the experience, also meeting the farmers and being able to taste the coffee directly there.
I love it. And I always find that on coffee farms, it tastes so fresh. It's just incredible. I guess direct farm to table in the literal sense from that end. Now, in terms of your coffee business, is your goal to? It seems like maybe to bring Colombia coffee to Europe, or what is kind of the approach that you have here?
Yes, so I want to bring coffee from my region, Quindío, here to Europe. And the focus is on sustainability and also, as is a minority owned company, to support the local people in my region. So that's the main objective of the brand, being able to give something back to the community there. Also, bringing good quality coffee that people, especially cyclists, could enjoy here so they can feel like, when you watch the video, then you can taste the coffee.
I love it, and that's absolutely coffee and cycling go hand in hand. I'm curious to hear a little bit more on the sustainability part. Is coffee traditionally a product that is not that sustainably produced?
Yes, indeed. So the processes sometimes in the farms, it can be like the sustainability angle that it has like different crops also to ensure there's no depletion in the soil, that the processes, they recycle the materials, there's no much waste, pesticides, etc. So that's one of our top priorities. So it was good to go to the farms to ensure. One thing is when you get a presentation of some pictures, and another thing is when you go to the farm, you speak with the people, you taste the coffee, you walk through the plantations. It's just much better to understand how everything works there.
Are is most of the coffee in that region already grown with no pesticides, or was it difficult to find a supplier that was not using chemicals?
Well, I already had a chat with a provider here who put me in contact with the farm. So they already did some screening beforehand. And then we decided to visit the potential farms that suited our standards.
Gotcha. Very, very interesting. Very topical topic. It's always interesting. I right in my as I was saying we were talking a little bit before the podcast. In my previous life, had ambitions to be a coffee importer, and I did it for a few years. But I found it to be a very challenging business. And it's interesting to hear your process on the sustainability, as well as too. I find it's always an interesting conversation talking to the farms about the maybe the seasonal work. And so there's kind of this elaborate economic ecosystem that I find that maybe Colombia goes through as well, where they need kind of workers to work for only a short period of the year. And so it's a complex economic position that everybody finds themselves in.
Yes, indeed. So that's why we want to support farms that ensure, like good wages for the employees and that work, for example, we work with a women's cooperative farm. So that's really important for us because it goes into this inclusivity aspect that we also want to implement in our cycling brand so that everybody feels welcome and they given an opportunity to work and enjoy what they love doing.
I love it. Do you find that are there many are a lot of women running farms down in Colombia, or is that still perhaps a more male dominated industry?
I think there's a lot of progress to be done, but
Okay.
I think there's some work being done, and that's one of our goals. We want to contribute to this change.
Right on. Perfect. Perfect. Now, um, sort of looking on YouTube and watching your cycling journey, it seemed like before the Transiberica, which is just a kind of a monster race, right? 3,000 plus or 3,500 plus kilometers. Um, but you kind of started doing much shorter rides. I guess I would pronounce it brevet, but is that? But I'll let you fix my pronunciation and explain just what are those races.
Yes, indeed. A brevet is not a race. There's no winner, so it's just a challenge, an event with control points along the way, and you have a time limit, and it's super fun because you get to ride with your friends if you want. Here, drafted is allowed, not like in the ultra races, so you can go with your mates, enjoy the route, have some fun. So it's a really good way to push yourself or to get into long distance cycling.
Do you enjoy the community aspect of those sorts of adventures?
For me, it's one of the top things that made me go into the sport. The ultra cycling community is so amazing. They are so welcoming. Everybody kind of knows each other. Also, meeting the other riders, hearing their stories on the road is so much fun. There's so many crazy stories that you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe that happened. You could be in the same race at the same place, nearly at the same time, and the other person had a completely different experience. So that's really fun to share with the community. Also, the community of dot watchers that follow the race, they are amazing. Sometimes you can be in the middle of nowhere in Spain and you hear somebody calling your name, and it really gives you a boost of motivation. People really follow the event, and it's a great community.
I've heard a lot of stories about encouragement, especially from the dot watching community, right? Especially to your point, perhaps when you're or somebody's at a low point, getting a message through to them, or even like if they're there in person, words of encouragement seem to go a long way.
Yes, indeed. Sometimes you just have people on the side of the road that you don't expect or you don't know, and they scream your name, and you kind of wake up again. So that happened to me race around the Netherlands. I was falling asleep, and all of the sudden, I hear my name, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm still cycling."
Now that's fantastic, and it's interesting because I feel like too you seem to it seems to be a wholly positive experience. Do you ever find it unnerving that somebody shouts out your name and you're like, where is this coming from?
Yeah, sometimes that happens because you are in another world sometimes, so you don't know what's going on around you. And in race around the Netherlands, I had a chair mixed neck, so I couldn't turn around or look at the people. I could only hold my neck in one position. So that was pretty tough. I felt I was being rude towards people not to look at them. But yeah, sometimes these kind of things happen during races.
Um, and over the course of all these adventures, do you find that you run up against mechanical issues, or on the whole, has your bike setup been pretty dialed?
Well, dialing my setup is one of the things I spend the most time before the race. I'm kind of always looking for the latest improvements, the latest gadgets. So that's something that I really enjoy. Also about ultra cycling, there's so many setups, there's so many ways to plan for an event. So it's really cool to be able always to improve something. I didn't have many mechanicals, only race around the Netherlands. I had a Pierce wall that I couldn't repair. I have to wait and go to the bike shop. But I was very lucky in Transiberica and other events that I didn't have many mechanicals.
Now, in an instance like that where a pierced sidewall is effectively a new tire. I don't know. There's the what's the old trick, the dollar bill trick to try to brace the side. It's where you I should maybe explain this. It's where the a pierced sidewall is if the side of the tire gets punctured, which is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to patch, and so you're kind of out of options. Um, and then the old trick is to take currency and to put it on the sidewall to hopefully get you through it. It sounds like in your case that wasn't an option.
Yes, I think it was my first race, so my mechanical skills were not there yet. I'm improving with every race. Yeah, I could have probably repaired it, but I decided to go to the bike shop instead.
I think that's a much better scenario, and I will say that the dollar bill trick I feel like is perhaps deep into the lexicon of bike knowledge. So not necessarily available to the first time racer. Now, when you had to wait to go to the bike shop, is that a race where you then had to go back to where you got your flat tire to restart?
Well, I was lucky because I have a foam insert in my tire that allows me to keep on riding. So I just kept on riding until I got to my hotel. I slept like something like 9 hours until the bike shop opened, and then continue riding to the bike shop. So I didn't leave the course because I was lucky that I had this foam insert that allowed me to keep on riding. You just have to pump every 100 kilometers, but it gets you to your destination. So that's really a really cool gadget.
You were kind of burying the lead there. Here I was trying to describe this like this old school fix, but you've got a solution already covered. I also like that it must have been maybe a blessing in disguise to be able to force you to sleep for 9 hours. I'm sure it was some well needed rest.
Yes, indeed. I felt like flying the next day.
Now, going back to these brevets, there is you mentioned that there is a more famous one that you were targeting in Paris that you were kind of building up to. What does it take to be able to ride in that particular adventure?
Yes, indeed. This is Paris-Brest. Paris is the longest, the oldest bicycle event in the world. So it's really the pinnacle for randonneuring and brevet. So what you have to do is every, I think, 4 years, and you have to qualify for it. So first you do a pre-registration. If you do like 1,000 kilometers or 1,200 kilometers, you can qualify for the first group. So there's different starting groups, and then to have better chances, you can become a super randonneur. So that's completing a brevet series of different distances, so 200, 300, etc. And then you can register for the event.
Is what is the advantage with starting with the front group?
Well, in brevets, there's no winner, but there's always a bit of competition
Okay.
in the low brevets. Let's say this is kind of the pinnacle of randonneuring, so it's good to start in the first group if you wanna go like fast and yeah. There's always a small element of competition, even if there's no winner.
And then, of course, and then is the race style of brevets similar to these like longer like the Transiberica, where you have a checkpoint or a location that you need to get to in using any route?
Yes, so brevets also have checkpoint. Normally, you have the brevet card that is a stamp at every checkpoint, and that's your rite of passage that proves that you were there. So, in the case of the ultra races, they have checkpoint, but they track it with a tracker, a GPS tracker, so people can know if you went to the checkpoints. In some of the races, they also ask you to stamp a card.
I love it. I love it. It's interesting that you've kind of been bitten by I don't know, the cycling bug, if you will, and really jumped into the deep end. And then so it sounds like too you've got longer races upcoming this year, and then do you have any sort of like dream rides down the future that you would like to do?
Yes, indeed. I'm hoping if I have enough time one day to do the Carretera Austral, like going from Patagonia to up to Chile and Argentina. That's kind of one of my bucket list bikepacking trips. And also going to Japan. I really want to explore Japan.
It's interesting. As of late, it seems like more and more people want to go to Japan. That maybe the cycling community is starting to emerge there.
Yes, indeed. And for what I've seen, there's so many amazing roads and also trails and gravel. So I think it's really picking up there. And the culture, the food. So it's something I always wanted to see and experience. So what a better way than cycling? For me, there's no better way than traveling by bike.
Now, the Patagonia trip that you talked about, that seems like it would be a pretty remote and rugged adventure. Is that the case, or is there frequent towns along the way as well?
I think it's quite remote in some areas, so it would be really challenging to manage supplies, also water, etc. But I think it adds to the experience. You feel like you're, exploring something new.
Now, as you kind of go through these adventures, it is interesting to see. I guess too. Just because I come from such like a outdoors camping hiking background, in your cases, are you virtually every night is ultimately spent in a hotel or some sort of you have a roof over your head at the end of the day? Is that correct? And is that kind of always your intention?
Yes, so in some races I tried to sleep outside, but I didn't manage.
Okay.
Just sleeping on a bench didn't work, so I think I have to work on my sleeping outside setup for the next events. But yeah, I was a bit tired, so knowing that you will arrive to a hotel or a place that you will have a roof over your head and you could take a warm shower definitely helps for motivation.
Right, right. It's got a lot of advantages, right? Less gear that you have to bring, no tent, no sleeping bag or bivy sack. And like you said, I always feel like I sleep better, and stay drier too in a hotel or something with a roof over your head. On the Patagonia trip, is that the same case, or would you need to bring like a sleeping bag and a tent?
Yeah, so I want to start doing more camping. So I'm planning to get a sleeping setup. And for Patagonia, definitely I will try to sleep outside. So just getting some very lightweight camping setup.
Sure, sure. I just I recently got to talk to a few cyclists who completed the Atlas Mountain race, and it's interesting hearing them talk. I guess I'm assuming that they're bringing kind of like a tent and more like a whole sleep setup. But I feel like I guess you can get away with pretty little in the night if you're motivated or perhaps tired enough, as the case may be.
Yes, indeed. You will be surprised the places where people manage to sleep.
I bet. I bet so. Wow. Okay. I feel like we've covered quite a bit pretty fast. Do you have any topics that you feel like I haven't talked about that you really really want to bring up?
No, I think we covered a lot of topics, but I just wanted to say, like, it makes me really happy to share the journey and to encourage people to try this kind of event. Sometimes it seems crazy to go into ultra cycling or doing this kind of long rides, but just people to know, like, you don't have to be a pro cyclist or you don't have to be like 10 years into cycling. You can just try it out, and it's a really enjoyable experience.
Great words, wise words as well. Sherry, it's incredible watching you on your YouTube channel kind of do these huge objectives as well as at the same time start a company. I know firsthand, kind of how difficult that can be. So you're a huge inspiration to me. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here.